Good morning. My name's Denise Cole. I'm one of this year's co-chairs for the RCPA conference. Welcome to RCPA's annual conference, Strive to Thrive. We would like to thank Brown & Brown Insurance for sponsoring our breakfast this morning, Mellon for sponsoring our mobile app, and RHA for sponsoring the charging station that's in the hallway to help keep your phones charged while using the conference app. We hope you enjoy your day today, starting with this plenary session and workshops this morning. Following this morning's sessions, please join us for our awards luncheon sponsored by Devereaux Behavioral Health, where we will have the opportunity to recognize 4 outstanding leaders. Later today, we will be opening Caroline Connections Hall with a reception where you will be able to meet many of our exhibitors and sponsors. This year, we have a few special activities, including a random gift drawing and puzzle mural that we invite you to all participate in. These special activities are sponsored by Staunton Farm Foundation and MindMed. You can also begin playing the word game by visiting the exhibitors. Tomorrow, we will be announcing a grand prize winner of $1,000 Visa gift card, sponsored by Magellan Health. This year, also, if you scan the QR code on the screen, you will be taken to a website where you will be able to live stream and translate the workshop this morning. Our speaker this morning is retired Judge Victor Reyes, some of who you may have joined a morning stretch with early this morning. He is a certified life coaching and master life coaching coach. He also has a substitute teacher license and facilitates groups at elementary schools. Judge Reyes facilitates offender system, facilitates weekly life skills session for incarcerated young people, and yoga at La Vista Correctional Facility, Colorado Department of Corrections, and to other groups such as ours. Please welcome Victor Reyes.
How are we doing today? I think that I missed some of you at the yoga this morning, is that correct? So my name is Victor Reyes, and it is just such an honor and pleasure to be spending some time with you this morning. And I want to thank Carol, friends, and also Chris Owen. Is Chris Owen here? God, I called him out, didn't I? Yeah. Well, I did that on purpose, so you can let him know. And I want to thank them for having me and also spending some time with me so I could get a really good understanding about what would benefit you most at this conference. I love the name of the conference, which is Strive and Thrive, right? It's a nice rhyme, but then, like many rhymes, how many of us actually live that in our daily lives? And it's something that we struggle with, sometimes we don't think about. And in focusing in on us as leaders, I don't think we should restrict it so much to leaders maybe in my organization, but also our relationships with ourselves, with our families, with our friends, and with our neighbors. Because by being in a healthier place, we really are able to access the types of emotions, the types of thoughts that really benefit not only ourselves, but everybody around us as they look to us for advice, for suggestions. So when we have these discussions, there's several objectives, things we're going to talk about. Some of them we're going to talk a little bit quickly about. Some we're going to spend some time with. So we're going to talk about this idea of stress. How many folks here feel stress? Okay, as I look out over this lovely audience, at least 3/4 of the arms are raised. I'm guessing the other quarters of the arms are still eating, so that's why you didn't raise your arms. And what about secondary trauma? how many of you feel that you're exposed to secondary trauma? So we don't have quite as many hands raised, and I think at times that may be because we don't also have a full understanding of how that concept is defined. We're also going to talk about this idea of mindfulness, because mindfulness, like yoga, it's the new buzzword. But many times we don't know what that really means. We have so many definitions, we have so many ideas of where it comes from, but we're going to discuss that a little bit today so we have a little bit better understanding. Next, what we're going to do is develop strategies to increase our resilience, and we're also going to talk about this idea of self-compassion. It's like, wow, that sounds kind of like an ego thing. But it's really not. I think one of the things that we miss a lot in our society is giving ourselves a break. How many of you feel that you give yourselves a break? Okay, now the hands are getting fewer and fewer as we go around. Stress, no problem. I can talk about stress all day long. Secondary trauma, I can talk about, but just a little spattering of hands come up when we talk about this idea of self-compassion. So now my friend Mike here is he wants to get his steps in. So I have a couple questions that he's going to help us with. So the first one is, what causes you stress at work? So, okay, good. I'm so happy that one of the furthest tables away put up their hands. So, oh, and you're sending somebody else. Okay, very nice. What causes the stress?
So in one of the sessions yesterday, we talked about a best day, worst day scenario, and a lot of the attendees' worst day scenarios had to do with things that were out of their control. Things that came at them that they didn't plan for, weren't prepared for, that they had to manage, that caused stress.
So things that are out of control cause stress. What other things cause stress, or even stress in you as a leader in a leadership role? Good, even farther away.
I would say unexpected or unanticipated interpersonal conflict.
Oh, that's very technical, isn't it? You're talking about unexpected interpersonal. You mean like dealing with people at work, right? Is that what you're saying? I mean, I think that's the interpretation of what I heard. What about as a leader? Anything else as a leader cause you stress? Yes.
Just the sheer amount of work. There's just not enough hours in a day, and if there were more, I'd be dead.
Volume, okay. So things maybe, and that's something that we can't control. You know, whatever's coming through the door, we've got to deal with. So just the sheer volume. And one more point as far as being a leader and how that causes us stress.
Trying to overcome the federal, state cuts, manage programs, and support staff through the whole process.
Oh, okay. So this idea of having to deal with like a lot of cuts going on right now. I don't know if that's happening in Pennsylvania. It sure is happening in Colorado where I live. And so now I'm going to have to I thought I knew what the landscape was, but we have a seismic shift in the landscape. I don't even know if I have a program anymore. I don't know if tomorrow we have to close down because of the budget cuts. So that does put a lot of stress because we have a lot of responsibility for a lot of people. But when we look at this idea of what causes us stress, this kind of is a little bit of an outline. Things like our caseload. Do you guys ever get public criticism of what you do? Yeah, worrying about what the newspapers are going to say, how that's going to reflect. One case that is just an aberration, so to speak, then that drives all of a sudden these laws that what makes sense in Pittsburgh makes no sense in a smaller community because your community doesn't function that way. And the other thing that we really leave out a lot is this idea of our personal life. my own things going on. Many of us in this room as leaders spend so much time trying to help other people's families. And I know many drug court judges who, as they're trying as hard as they can to save the children of people they don't know, lose their own child to drugs, lose them to an overdose. And I am very confident in saying that people in this room have also experienced that. That while you're trying to deal with other people's families, your own is suffering. And at times, we get so frustrated because with all that we know, we just can't seem to help. So I'm going to show you a couple pictures. The first is me 4 years into being a judge. Now, I don't know why I'm doing this, but this was like an open car at the State Fair parade. And it's like, and I look back on that, it's like, you know, I was doing criminal law cases at this time, and here I am just kind of driving down the street, waving at everybody, you know, and I got a couple jeers, and I did recognize a few people, and luckily they didn't put out a program to see that I was in it, but yeah, and what I see when I see this picture is somebody who has a really good job, but really wasn't that healthy. And then you flash forward to this case of People versus Paul Stark. And I see we have a person taking photographs here. And I knew at the time that this photograph was taken, and Stark was a horrible rape, homicide of a 14-year-old girl. And they wanted to take pictures. I allowed them to take pictures in the newspaper so long as I knew what was going on. So they had to get up, stand up, and take pictures. This is the best I could muster at that moment in the middle of that trial, knowing full well they were taking that photo. I look very judicious, don't I? I got my finger on my chin. I moved it up there. I got the books open. I got my cup of coffee there. That's probably my, you know, don't we do that 4:45? Oh my God, I need one glass of coffee to get me through the last 15 minutes, and we wonder why we're not sleeping late at night. Yeah, but this was the result of where I was at that moment of life. And I didn't understand about stress. And I was a leader in my community because just being a judge, the role of being a judge brings an obligation of leadership. So as I started dealing with things, I had to start asking myself questions. So, are you stressed? You know, some of us realize that, and that we're dealing with a lot of professionals in this room who are well aware of these terms. Sometimes well aware of how these terms apply to other human beings rather than applying it to ourselves. Right? I mean, how many times, we understand that. We understand that during the day. We get all caught up during the day. But then we can start looking at this idea of stress and how's it affecting my life? How did stress and secondary trauma affect my life? I don't drink and I didn't do drugs. But I sure did like to eat. And I don't know if this is the right place to say this, but I used to like to eat Oreo cookies. Okay? And then when I found double stuffed Oreo cookies, I was in heaven. But it eventually led to my doctor one day telling me that I had two options. I could either die of a heart attack or die of a stroke. I said, well, what's my third option? And he says, right now you don't have one. So at that point in my life, I hadn't developed the tools because we didn't talk about these tools. We didn't talk about trauma when I was in law school in 1984. We didn't talk about anxiety disorders or anxiety or panic attacks, some of which I'm very confident people in this room have had in their work or in their personal relationships. So as we start looking at this idea of stress, and trauma, we understand these things. We understand that I think under the under PTSD or the DSM, what, 5? We're up to 5 or 6 now. 5. Okay, we haven't quite moved to 6. But with DSM-5, we know about PTSD. We know that if you are stressed, I believe, more than 30 days of continuous stress, you're working your way into PTSD. And I'm guessing in looking around this room that many of you have worked for longer than 30 days, right? And you could probably, if you're here with people who are new to your organization, they're all chipper, they went to the party last night, and and they got up early this morning and they made it to breakfast, and some of you are like, ugh, I just want to sleep. And so as we are looking at this, there's different types of stress. There's this idea of acute stress. We have this idea of the types of stressors that are a continuum, and they are cumulative. Many of us, from the first day of work, we look a heck of a lot different 2-3 years into the job, right? And then there's this magic thing that happens like about 6 months before you retire, as you start unloading things. And then when you retire, there are people, when you look at them when they retire, they look a hell of a lot better than when they were working. Why? Because the stress just manifests itself in our bodies. It manifests in our face. It manifests in the way we hold our posture. It overwhelms us, and many of us don't have the tools to adequately deal with those things. And then there's this idea of kind of Eurostress, which we're talking about, stressors that are good for us, stressors that help us grow. So what happens when we have stress in our body? This is also, by the way, an eye test. So if there's problems seeing this, but yeah, it manifests on all levels of our body. And the reason I think this is important to talk about, especially when people are in leadership roles, is that how we are dealing with the stressors in life will manifest in our workplace. It will manifest in the way we treat our coworkers. It will manifest in the way we treat our families. And I can tell you, in not dealing with stress, when my 2 daughters were younger, when I was working, definitely affected my relationship with them. And I have a much different relationship with my grandson now than I ever had with my children. And when my daughters confront me with that, my only response is, well, I like him a lot better than I liked you guys. Which I don't suggest as a good response when you're told that you're treating him a lot better. And as we look at this thing with stress and trauma, we start looking at this idea of connecting with our bodies. And one of the questions that I always ask myself, and started asking myself, is, do I need to be healed? It's like, okay, well, I thought for many years no, because I was tough. I've seen everything. How many of you have, I know you guys have said that, because I heard you guys, like in your discussions yesterday at your tables, talking about some of your cases. And how, yeah, I've seen these things, and I've seen everything. I can deal with everything. But at times, that's probably one of the greatest falsehoods or lies we can tell ourselves. That although we are definitely having a mindset that, especially when we get leadership roles, we've already done all that work that these other social workers have to do now. Now I have to supervise a group of therapists, or I'm supervising a group of social workers. But still, those experiences stay with us. So what do I need to, and I have to say, do I need to be healed? And then what do I need to be healed from? And how do I start and maintain this idea of a healing process? For me, one of the things was secondary trauma. And very, very, it's a concept that, once again, trauma is not something we talked about 20 years ago. Everything was environmental factors. We didn't think about the effects that life had on us. And, once again, percentage-wise, there are people in this room who've lived in homes where there's been domestic violence. There are people in this room who have had experiences in their personal life that no human being should ever have to go through. And also that experience is maybe something that motivated us into the line of work that we're doing. So when we look at this idea of trauma and reflecting on trauma, it's something that we have to be very cognizant about and very willing to admit that the reports that I read, the interviews that I'm doing with this child, they're having an effect on me. So not only do I have the stressors of life that I'm dealing with, and as something that we did talk about this morning in the yoga program, in our yoga session, was aging. And some of us right now are dealing in our homes with aging parents. Where are they going to live? Are they going to live with me? How's that going to impact my life? We have life factors that affect us from the day that we were born. Life experiences that many of us, including myself, never dealt with. We suppressed them, never thought that they would manifest. So how does this work into this idea of leadership? Well, it works in my mind, having been, once again, in a leadership position, and having known many judges and other supervisors over my lifetime, is it manifests in everything that we do. And you can say, well, not in my life. And maybe some of you have been able to conquer this. Maybe some of you have been able to deal with this in a healthy way. But then at times when we're in the middle of, you go to the ocean, you get caught up in a wave, right? And the wave just keeps on hitting you, you keep on rocking, you keep on flipping. When you're in the middle of that, you don't know which way is up. And sometimes you get a little desperate when we're in the water. And we're not exactly riding waves. And many times when we're in the middle of these things, the middle of life, we don't from the outside see how we're acting, what we're doing, how we're impacting other human beings' life. And so as we look at this idea of trauma and how it manifests in the body, as was indicated earlier, I spend a lot of time now in the prisons. So I run classes, not only at the women's prison, but also at the Federal Correctional Institute in Florence. And some of you with parole and probation knowledge may know that that's where Supermax is. So I have run classes, and currently the one class I run at United States Penitentiary is at the Stages program. So I have a firsthand view, once a week only, for a couple hours, of the effects that trauma has on the body, on the mind, and taking it one step further, on the soul of human beings. And as we look at this idea of our bodies, we have, of course, the sympathetic and parasympathetic nerve systems. People familiar with these, right? So we know about these. We know about which ones to access. And unfortunately, we don't do a very good job of it. And we react in ways to the violence and the trauma that we witness. And once again, secondary trauma, sitting there reading reports, sitting there doing interviews. You're interviewing a child who's been subjected to things that no child should ever be subjected to, who you could see from your experience how dead their eyes are from the amount of abuse that they have had and how they've numbed themselves. And you go back to your office, you seek out coworkers, and you cry, and you get upset. You may even go home and hug your own child a little bit more, a little tighter. But some of us, when we don't deal with these issues, have these kind of reactions. So I don't care what group it is. Everybody familiar with ACEs, adverse child experiences, right? We could say that this is an RCPA ACEs test, okay? So those of you who have had those experiences and are in leadership positions, how many of you still have these physical manifestations from the work that you do? Maybe some eating disorders, eating problems because you're consoling yourself, sweating or chills, clammy hands, maybe even driving to work in the morning is something you dread. Waking up Monday morning, you're not exactly cheery because you know exactly what you're going to be facing the rest of that week. You go to vacation, right? Your first 3 days of vacation is unwinding from all your experiences. Maybe 3 days of vacation actually chilling, and then the rest of vacation preparing to come back to work. Why? Because of these experiences. We also have difficulties thinking. We also have feelings, emotions that manifest. And once again, this is, I'm talking about this because I think the latter part of our conversation and what I'm going to be discussing doesn't just apply to people who are in leadership roles. I think every one of us in our lives can adopt these things. I know when I started adopting these, this was at the tail end of my career. So I had gone 15 years as a public defender, 12 years as a judge. So you do the math, because that's a lot of math for me. So 27 years of working in the system. And then the last 3 years is when I finally got myself together in probably the healthiest way possible. So what do we need to do as leaders, as professionals? Is I think we have to start understanding this term resilience and maybe learning how to live with many of these terms that we understand. We're very good about going through the DSM. We're very good about reading articles. We're very good about understanding how others get affected. Because I was very good at that. I could read the reports. I could see the impacts. But I did not see how this was affecting my life. And like I told you earlier, the way I dealt with it was I focused completely on my professional life because I didn't have the bandwidth or the energy to put it into my home. And that's totally on me. And part of it also is frankly, we don't work or grow up in systems that, at least until the past several years, have put the support systems in place to help people get through this important work. So what helps us? What helps you become more resilient? I'm got a little comfortable there. So let me ask you this. What helps you increase your resilience? If you could share with other people. Wow. And take a moment and think about the silence that we have. Is this something that I even think about? Is this something that I've even sat around with my team and developed the support systems that we need, that we know these things as professionals. We use these buzzwords. And as I ask this question, is what builds your resilience? Either you've become very shy, or some of us really don't have those tools in place. I know I didn't for many tools. So I think we have somebody who's going to volunteer something here. Yes.
Hello, good morning. I think something that I have instilled within my department was little changes, like obviously with their permission, I give good morning hugs. I'll ask how their day was once they left. And then throughout the day, if we get very, very busy and I don't have a chance to ask how everyone is doing, during our huddle time, I'll just thank them for all the hard work. Because sometimes that's needed. And I also have times where I'll notice if someone is just not being themselves, I'll just go over and say, hey, is everything okay? Would you like to talk? Just giving them that opportunity. That makes me feel good because then I know when I'm down, my team notices. And it's very important, something you hit in the head. One of my coworkers said to me the one time, I was struggling to get to work every single day. I would even cry to drive to work. But ever since you took over, I no longer feel that way. So I know that I'm moving in the right direction because building that morale and that connection with them is so important.
Okay, and I'm going to hold that mic for a second, and I'm going to re-ask the question. How have you personally built up your resilience?
I have built up just having that positive team because everything could be falling apart at home, but going to work actually makes me happy because what I do matters not just for the clients, but not just for the clients, but for my team as well. So that to me helps me feel better.
Okay, so an idea of positivity, right?
Absolutely.
Now, I know people have also heard this term, toxic positivity. I think there's a whole book on it, right? Toxic positivity, which, we can all have our opinions. I'm not a professional. I'm just a judge. There's a reason I didn't go to any more professional school. There's a reason that I was a philosophy history major. And that was because, I don't have the knowledge of psychiatry or psychologists, and I don't pretend to. But when we look at this idea of positivity, what we're very simply talking about is a mindset.
I have.
I'm sorry, who was that?
What we did is, I think a lot of people in the room know about RAP. And we have a day of training where we bring all the staff together from all the different counties. And we have facilitators. We had the facilitators teach all the staff how to do their own wellness recovery action plan in dealing with everything, both in their personal life, but at work. What are the tools that you have that you can draw on when you hit that barrier, and how do you maintain wellness in the meantime? And it was very enlightening to a lot of the staff to have to stop and think about that, you know? We all need tools in our toolbox, you know?
Right, absolutely. And once again, like you said, it's things that we don't think about. We spend so much time as caregivers, and we've done it since we've been in grad school. We've done it with a million different people, a million different styles, a million different ways. But when it comes to ourselves, it's really difficult at times. And this is not an ego thing. It is not. Self-compassion is not egotistical. Self-compassion is actually one of the best tools that you can develop in order to be the best leader, and I think the best human being that you can be. So as we look at these other tools that we can use, you see right there also we talk about this notion of compassion. And I also recognize, and I recognize this even at the last conference that I spoke at, is there are some words, some thoughts that in the current state of affairs get a lot of pushback. And we have to recognize that we are human beings. We are human beings who see some pretty difficult situations. And as human beings, our brains will react in certain ways. Our bodies will react in certain ways. And for some people, even having this conversation about how the work is affecting me, it may be maybe even feeling a little uncomfortable sitting here as we're discussing this. So now let's talk a little bit about mindfulness. When you look at this, we've got this dog, and we've got this person walking, and so there's a huge difference. Which one of these characters can you better associate with? Right? You have this, the human with the jumbled up mind. You're walking your dogs, and I've seen people walking their dogs, and I'm thinking now, are you walking your dog for the dog's benefit? Or are you here with the dog for your benefit? Because a lot of people they just keep on going, and sometimes their dog's trying to sniff around, trying to figure out a place to go to the bathroom, or just is out of the house. I mean, I walk dogs. I don't have a dog. I travel too much to have a dog. But I walk dogs. And the dogs live in a kennel. And when they get outside, they just want to smell smells. So when I walk a dog, it takes me about an hour and a half to walk a dog. I have the time to do it, but I'm also walking that dog for the dog's benefit. But I also know, for the limited time that I did have a dog, that I was more of the human. My mind was wherever it was at that moment, and I was tugging my dog along because I wanted to get moving. So, and my dog was kind of in the middle of just enjoying everything around him, whatever, I was at 37,000, smells that a dog has, or some kind of number like that. So I definitely did connect a heck of a lot more with the human in this. And as we look at this idea of the mind and stressors, we have certain things that happen with our brain. And later on today, I'm going to be introducing this concept of whole brain living that Dr. Jill Bolte-Taylor, she has a book on it, and we're going to be discussing the human brain in that session. But we have certain rigidity in our mindsets. We have certain ingrained ideas of the way it is. Then we've got this reptilian brain, right? Everybody's heard of the reptilian brain. This primitive brain that keeps us going, keeps us alive. It's got its benefits. It's kept us out of danger. It's made our species survive for this long. But it's got its drawbacks in how we deal with situations, in how we deal with life. So there are ineffective management tools, and some of you may be able to relate to this numbness that happens. Some of us deal with what we, even as leaders. I mean, I saw the chief judge of my district basically go into a hole and numb out. When I was the head of the public defender's office in Pueblo, I was 29 years old, which is a very young age to head an office. But the other thing that happened is in 1 month, we had 10 homicides. The month of January, had to be January of 1989. And I was one of the oldest people in the office, and all of a sudden we had 10 murders. And we had to get help. You know what I did? I covered myself up in a hole. Because at 29 years old, I had enough time, hard time dealing with the cases I had. But now to have 10 homicides in one, and I know some of you are from bigger cities, you can say, well, what's 10 homicides? But no, for any city, that amount in 1 month is a lot. And so I did that. Some of us maybe drink a little bit too much. Maybe we smoke a little bit too much. Maybe we medicate ourselves in a negative way. Because I think one of the things that we have to definitely deal with as we are having these discussions is that people who are prescribed medicines in order to help them function, get through the day, is a stigma that really affects professions in a negative manner. It's a stigma that we're really trying to confront, at least in the judicial well-being area. There are folks here who are taking high blood pressure medicine or some kind of medicine to get through the day. Nobody thinks about that. But the minute somebody says that somebody's taking some kind of medication that have stabilized them, then all of a sudden stigmas attach. Sometimes we shop a little. I don't know, how some of you shop a little bit more than you should? Yeah, that happens. I see. Oh, we've got a hand up. The only person in the room who was brave enough to actually put up her hand, and I appreciate you. Thank you. But yeah, that's kind of retail therapy. And, I've got this, and then suicide. I know that at least there was a public defenders in Boulder, 4 guys that I know lived in the same house. 3 of those 4 have committed suicide. And the 4th showed up to the 3rd's funeral just to tell us, hey, I'm not going to do this. But these are the realities that happens with pressure. So when we look at this concept of mindfulness, what does that mean? So we have this John Kabat-Zinn definition that talks about this moment-to-moment awareness of what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, without any judgment. People familiar with this? It's kind of like the mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR. Folks know that one. It's been around for a very, very long time. But when we look at this idea of mindfulness too, one of the definitions given by one of my teachers named Alan Wallace is just being completely present with what is happening in the here and now. How many of you are able to do that on a regular basis? How many times does an employee come in that is seeking your guidance on something, and as they're talking, you may not be really listening to what they're saying because you got the answer? Right? And I know people do that. I know I do that. But because our mind is not really listening, it's ready to give solutions. but not totally present with what that person needs. When we look at this idea of mindfulness, it's this idea of being right here, right now, not on our phones, which is probably one of the biggest detractors of being present. And we really, really pride ourselves, right, to multitasking. How many of you have more than 2 monitors attached to your computer? Okay, yeah. How many eyes do you have? And where do those sets of eyes go? But no, I got 3 monitors because I can have 3 things up. I got my email open. I have this, whatever I have here. But we all have the email open, right? Because I got to respond right away, which then creates the other stressor on the people who are sending you the email when you don't reply right away. And it's part of the culture that's starting to shift, almost like a lack of patience. So we really don't stay mindful very long. The mind likes to be distracted. Maybe even here, it's like, wow, this guy's 45 minutes in his talk, we have another half hour left. I'm a little distracted, you know? And it's because the mind likes to wander. Why does the mind like to wander? Well, it's because it doesn't like to be controlled. It doesn't like to focus. So it likes to run away. It's almost like it sees like sparkles. It's like, oh, okay, I'm going to walk over here. I'm going to walk over there. But when we're a leader and we're doing that, when people are relying on us, it doesn't really instill the best of confidence. How many of you know people that you work with who, although they're sitting there with you, you know they're in a whole different world? And what does it feel like when you go to your supervisor with an issue and you get that reaction from them? I know you've had it. We've all experienced it. It isn't really the best feeling in the world. And so when we look at this idea of mindful awareness, I'm kind of just going a little bit forward here. I didn't know this little thing moved too when I do that. Oh, no, it's good. No, Tim, I'm good. I just noticed it. It's good. We're good. I'm positive. Thank you so much. Tim just does an amazing job of keeping me focused and has done so from the beginning. So I deeply appreciate that. And I think we should give Tim a round of applause because the IT people are always overlooked in conferences. So when we look at this idea of neuroscience and the research, there's been, 25 years ago you could Google, I don't know if you could you Google 25 years ago? I don't know if you could or not. But you probably couldn't Google 25 years ago. But if you went to the library 25 years ago and looked up books on mindfulness, you might have had 2 or 3. Or if you went to Barnes & Noble, or back then your local little bookstore that was run by some, mom and pop operation, you could look up books on mindfulness, and there may be 2 or 3 of them. Now there's entire sections dedicated to personal well-being. And when you look at a lot of those books, what you're basically getting down to is more awareness, more focus. And one of the areas we're going to focus on now is this idea of compassion. So I'm going to, I did that on purpose. Okay. He warned me about this. So, how would you define compassion? What does compassion look like to you? Any ideas? There's no wrong answer. Caring. Okay. We have caring. Empathy. Yes.
I always think of it as kindness in action.
Kindness in action. Okay. Other ideas about the definition of compassion. Do people, show of hands, how many people in this room feel they are compassionate people? Okay, every hand should just go up, just a clue. We should all be raising our hands because I'm a compassionate person. But when we define it, we are defining it in terms of being kind, being empathetic, but the person in the back just added a word, which was action. So when we look at this definition of compassion, so after all these articles have been written, after all this research is done, people started doing meta-studies on the research. Bless you. And one of the things that came out of this meta-study is this idea that compassion has been kind of misdefined. So there's several ways we interact with people. One of the first ways we interact with people is we sympathize with them. The worst way we interact with people is pity. When we are pitying people, we are looking down on them. I'm going to date myself now, but I grew up with the A-Team and with Mr. T. All right? How many of you remember Mr. T? There we go. Now, when Mr. T pitied the fool, it didn't look like he was coming from the depths of his heart, right? No. Mr. T was looking down on him. So pity, and then we move up to sympathy, this idea of a connection with folks. Empathy takes us one step further. Empathy means that I can either, because of my experiences, or cognitively, because I'm a human being, I can understand what you're going through. I can understand loss. I can understand losing a job. I can understand maybe even losing a child. Empathy can be positive or negative, right? I mean, Pittsburgh's playing, somebody drops the football in the end zone, you feel bad, although they're maybe 1,000 miles away. Somebody catches a football in the end zone, you're up and you're jumping around in your living room. That's empathy. You're feeling those feelings. Compassion goes one step further. And it's having these positive intentions, and it also means that you want to take action. So it's seeing people in distress, coupling that with an action that is coming from wisdom. But if I'm so distracted with everything going on and I don't focus, can I totally access the wisdom that I need? I was able to funnel my wisdom only into work, not so much when I got home. And I can make all the excuses I wanted to at the time. But once again, like I said earlier, my bandwidth was very limited in what I could give. And my cup was never ever full, it never overflowed, because I didn't have anything to put in it. So as we look at this notion of compassion, we move up to this whole idea of a compassionate, mindful leader. And this is where we're going to spend the last few minutes talking here. So the research shows, and Otto Scharmer's, are people familiar with the work of Otto Scharmer? If you're not, have a look at it, because he has this theory about how we deal with anything. He's an economist. But his theory is very applicable to many things that we do. When we look at these traits of a compassionate leader, a mindful leader, I think you need awareness in order to have these. The first is integrity, a sense of professional transparency and an alignment with my value system. Some of you may even say, well, what is my value system? What are my core values? Am I living as a leader consistent with my core values? Do I even know what my core values are? Could I even name them? Am I living in alignment with who I am or want to be as a human being? And part of this integrity is being honest, sharing information honestly. And I believe you do have, as part of the app, this PowerPoint. So please feel free to reference it, feel free to use it in any way that you want to. Because these concepts have been around for many years. We're just trying to talk about how, as a leader, and ask yourself that question. How is my integrity as a leader? Am I honest when it comes to things? Am I transparent? Transparency is a word we hear a lot nowadays. But transparency, I'm going to have to look up the definition of it sometimes because it seems kind of opaque, you know, when we deal with other folks. We're not as open at times with our coworkers. Here's another big one: accountability. Accountability, not just for myself, but when I'm setting performance standards, am I living up to those standards myself? There's nothing that destroys your credibility more than preaching about something and then doing the reverse in your own life or in how you deal with your clients or how you deal with other people in your office. And when we take this idea, when we're a compassionate leader, and we've kind of getting rid of some of the fog, we're able to access more of the wisdom. We are a lot more present with people. This idea of presence, this takes a lot of work. Because as we're having conversations, how focused do we stay? Where is my mind at when I am talking to others? Am I right here with them right now? Or can I honestly say, as I'm listening to this person, I'm going to use these words, Babylon, going, you know, it's like, have I floated away? And when I'm floating away, where am I floating to? I remember this one time, I was getting off the phone, really upset in the middle of a trial, and here I was going to head out from my chambers back to the courtroom. And my court reporter, I had the type of relationship with my clerk and my court reporter where she stopped me and said, just take a few breaths before you go back out. Many of us, many of us forget to eat during the course of the day. Or if we eat all hurriedly. Some of us forget to go to the bathroom during the day. Because we're going. Another couple are empathy, understanding of another's perspective. How open are we to placing ourselves either with coworkers, people we supervise, or even our clients in their quote-unquote shoes? How judgmental am I when somebody walks through the door dressed in a way that I don't think is appropriate? How much do I impose my value system on others who are here to get my help, my support, my assistance, yet I'm kind of judgy of them? I even, when they leave, go to a coworker's office and talk about them. Like, can you believe what this person said? I know I've done that. And that's being very judgmental, because I never took this time to take a step back and think, maybe if this person didn't have these issues, they wouldn't be sitting here in front of me. Or maybe their life is such that they are just totally living in their sympathetic system, dealing with their trauma, and everything is fight or flight. I have found that working with people in prisons, manipulation is second nature. Why? Because that's how you survive on the streets. That's how you survive in a prison. Why wouldn't you expect anybody who day to day is trying to wake up the next morning, not lean on manipulating in order to get through life? But we judge that. Authenticity. Showing some vulnerability and openness. Doesn't mean you open your heart to everybody. We all have our boundaries on what to do. But this word, being authentic, is something that there's a lot of debate on. What the heck does that mean? Does being authentic mean if you're like an ass, that you're always an ass, 24/7, you don't try to cover it up? That's being inauthentic if I'm really a mean person, but I'm trying to cover this up. Or does it more mean, at least from the things I've read and experienced, that I live my life in alignment with my ethics, my morals, and my values? Think about those times when you have been, quote unquote, inauthentic. We all have, we're human beings. Think of those times and how it felt in order to engage in those types of activities. Doesn't feel very good, does it? Doesn't feel very good when you're hanging out with people who maybe have a different way of thinking or doing things than you do, and you keep your mouth shut because they're hanging out with you. These are my friends. But in the end of the day, even as you're sitting there, there's like an inner struggle, because you almost feel like you're being inauthentic as you're engaging in those kind of conversations. And the last, but not definitely least, is dignity. Treating everybody with dignity, regardless of what their background may be, regardless of what their experiences may be, regardless of how, quote unquote, different you may feel somebody may be, whatever that may be. And when we look at this idea of dignity, it's also encouraging, supporting people's feeling of self-worth. The number one thing I have found from being in the prisons going on 9 years now, so I've seen thousands of people. I know you have seen a lot more, but over the course of my lifetime, between being a PD, working as a judge, and now my third, it looks like, career of coming into facilities, the one thing that I see is the lack of self-worth that people have. As we have our discussions, because I run discussion workshops too, in the facilities, is this idea of, I don't even deserve to be happy. I don't deserve to thrive. Can you imagine being in a state of mind that just having nice things just having a comfortable, peaceful life is something you don't feel you even deserve. And as you deal with, folks who have been traumatized, as you're trying to, whatever tools that you may have in order to increase their self-worth, their own personal dignity, we must also never forget to apply these concepts, all of these 6 concepts, to ourselves. So when we look at these ideas of increasing awareness, we have this, like once again, I talked about, we have this incredible ability to put ourselves second. So whatever you can do, and we're in the last few minutes talking about these things, is take care of yourself. Find those things that resonate with you, that put you in the best position possible, physically, emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually, of being the most accessible person to their own, to their wisdom, to be able to access those things that you need to better support others. How do we do these things? Well, cultivating wise compassion takes a lot of work. I think I saw something the other day, is everybody wants to do things better, right? You want to be a better human being until we see how much work it takes to get there. And then not so much. Now, well, maybe I'll just put that off. I'm going to put off doing this. I'm going to put off doing that. It takes a heck of a lot of work to bring yourself in a position, in a state where you are, and have the ability to cultivate wise compassion. And once again, it's this idea of wisdom. It's not just being compassionate, but being in a state of mind where we can connect with that part of us that can offer the best advice, come up with the best plans. I heard, one of the discussions I heard at the table the other day was, well, people are just trying to do their best with what we've got. But if we're not in a good physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual state, I don't think we can. That's just my own feelings. But I know it definitely didn't work for the people I knew who were in leadership roles. And then when we look at this idea of compassion, have more self-compassion. Give yourselves a break. You seem to give breaks to everybody around you, but aren't we the harshest critics to ourselves? Aren't we the hardest to ourselves? Don't we own so much of what other people do? Don't we own when people don't follow through with their programs? You can only do so much, and so long as you are staying educated, so long as you know that case file, so long as you are aware of what resources you have in your community, and you're even trying to augment those resources through the work that you do, you should go home every day feeling that these human beings are blessed that I'm the person who's doing this work. That's not egotistical, folks, because wouldn't you want a doctor who's doing surgery on you, on a very vital organ, to not be thinking about the fight they just had when they left home? Right? We wouldn't want our doctor thinking about that. But many of us kind of go through the days like that. When we look at this notion of actionable routines, check your intentions. Why am I doing this work? What is my true, not motivation, but what is my true intention in what I do on a daily basis? Develop a compassion practice. It is not being self-indulgent. It is actually developing resilience. It's developing those tools that you need to be, once again, the best human possible for yourself, your loved ones, and anybody else you interact with. This idea of wisdom means competence as a leader, as a compassionate, mindful leader. Developing a deeper understanding of what gets people to do those things that are needed to put our organization in the best place possible. If my mind is muddy, can I really understand people as well? If I don't have my own kind of house in order? We always are balancing too. So being compassionate sometimes means doing the hard thing. Letting the person go may be the most compassionate thing for them or for your organization. So as we redefine some of these words, as we understand some of these words, sometimes what may be looking as the most drastic action may be the most compassionate action. So as we look at this notion, once again, of wisdom, we have certain actionable routines that we can take for wisdom. We can practice transparency, things we've talked about a little bit before. We can do this on our daily interactions. And once again, leadership training, compassionate training, mindfulness training. Then there's being a leader when things are good is always good, right? It's great to be a leader when everything is going right. You get awards, you get accolades, you come to conferences, you get like a little trophy to take home. But it's the leadership in crisis where there's a lot of challenge. So when we look at leadership in crisis, we learn to mitigate the effects of the crisis, not only on ourselves, but everybody around us. And when we look at mitigating these issues, we're talking about elevating not only the leaders in our organizations, but our fellow members. And to participate in dealing with the crisis, dealing with the after effects of the crisis. And as we are looking at this idea of mitigating, we have to also recognize the emotions and the things people are going through when they're in crisis. Not just brush it off. You know, recently what happened in the CDC with the shooting is horrible. And people need to be supported. I'm sure there's organizations here where somebody with some mental health issues has come in and scared the hell out of everybody in your offices. And how do we deal with that afterwards? How do we present the support afterwards? So what we want is compassionate leadership during crisis, also healing. And the most important in my mind, too, at the end of the day, is learning to maintain hope. You as a compassionate leader have that obligation to do so. So as we are looking at just closing out here, practices that we can engage in, what works for me may not work for you. We're all individuals. We all have our different impacts in our lives, things that work for us. Mindful practices, being non-judgmental. Also, just once again, just listing of practices. So may I encourage you from this conference on, go back and be honest with yourself. Am I really the healthiest person? And if I can honestly say I'm not, it took me like 33 years to kind of really come to that conclusion, even after I retired a little bit. I still had a lot of work to do. If I'm not, how can I become so? Thank you very much for your patience, and thank you for staying throughout my talk. I appreciate it. I think, are we taking a break? Okay, so I think we're taking a break, and I think we have breakouts after this. So.